Someone help me." As soon as our eyes met, I could tell the college girl was asking for help. And then, I ended up helping her and being late for an important business meeting. "This means you're off the fast track now, serves you right." My boss had a smile on his face. "I, Lucas, have been better at studying than most since I was a child. I don't remember ever being stuck with my studies, and my grades were always at the top. When I entered middle school, my friends would come up to me every time there was an exam and say, 'Teach me how to study.' Of course, I never turned them down. My mother always told me, 'Cherish your friends.' In fact, that's all she ever said. My father never once told me to study. Perhaps, growing up in such a home environment allowed me to thrive and excel academically. Anyway, I graduated from middle and high school with excellent grades. Afterward, I graduated from a prestigious university and joined a company considered top tier by society. People often told me I was on the fast track, and even as a new employee, I was entrusted with significant responsibilities because I was seen as a rising star. Among my peers, many were envious of me. But of course, there were also those who were jealous. For example, my boss, John, was one of them. Whether or not he's truly jealous of me, there's no doubt that he sees me as an enemy. John would call me out for every little thing, constantly reprimanding me. He criticized things like outdated documents or typos in emails, essentially nitpicking over trivial matters. Honestly, it was troubling and sometimes hindered my work. Still, I couldn't complain directly to John, because he was the right hand of the executive vice president, Mr. Baker. John always followed Mr. Baker around and even accompanied him on his golf outings on weekends. He even went to the extent of driving Mr. Baker to and from lunch in his own car. He was always showing off his connection with Mr. Baker to everyone around. And he would use that connection to act boldly towards his subordinates. Whenever I complained, John would immediately threaten me with, "I'll tell Mr. Baker on you." Needless to say, he never used words like fired or demoted directly. He would just insinuate it, effectively silencing anyone. While silencing his subordinates, John was incredibly weak towards his boss. When the department head, George, said, "Let's go out for drinks today," John would cheerfully reply, "Yes, yes, I'd be delighted to join," and follow along easily. He behaved the same way towards senior managers and division chiefs. In other words, he would flatter those above him in power and dominate those below him to ensure they couldn't oppose him. He was such a troublesome and outdated person. That's why no one in the same department dared to oppose him. In the end, all I could do was use John as a negative example and vow to become a better boss when I climbed the ladder. For now, if I did my job without any mistakes, he wouldn't have any grounds to complain. Thinking this, I was extremely careful with my daily work. "All right, finished with today's work. John, please check this." This was when I submitted documents that I had carefully checked as usual. John frowned. I checked everything thoroughly, so there shouldn't be any mistakes with the characters or numbers. Why the frown, then? As I was thinking this, John let out a sigh and said, "Lucas, you haven't made any mistakes recently. What's up?" "I'm about to be promoted to senior staff, and I've had your guidance, John." "Is that so? Then, I have another good job for you. Be at the front of the company at 7 a.m. tomorrow." 7 a.m. Why is that? "It's for a golf outing." John said this to me with a sly grin. When I heard more about it, it turns out that our client, President Johnson, is a fan of golf. Mr. Baker hit it off talking about golf, and they quickly made plans to go together. However, just Mr. Baker and John alone might not make for the most lively outing. So, it seems they've decided to bring John and one other person along. Anyone is fine to bring along, but according to Mr. Baker, beginners take too much time, so they are out of the question. That's when John thought of me, since I was in the golf club during my school days. Even though it's an invitation from John, if it involves Mr. Baker and her client Mr. Johnson, it's a business engagement, which is a serious matter. There was no way a mere employee like me could refuse. Reluctantly, I agreed to go to the business golf outing. And the next day, I headed to the station earlier than usual to catch the train. We were supposed to travel from the company to the golf course in John's car. Moreover, Mr. Baker was supposed to provide the golf clubs and other equipment. So, all I had to do was make sure I wasn't late to the office. It should have been that simple, yet I encountered some bad luck. The train I boarded was packed with commuters, a typical rush hour scene. It wasn't so crowded that I couldn't move at all, but it was uncomfortable enough to make me miss the trains I usually take. As I was thinking that I should have taken a taxi to the office, I happened to look up. That's when I noticed a college girl sitting in the seat in front of me. "What's wrong? You seem bothered by something." Upon closer inspection, next to the college girl, who looked annoyed, was a middle-aged man who appeared to be asleep. He looked like a company employee, half drunk from the morning, leaning on the college girl's shoulder. Moreover, his mouth was slightly open, and with his crossed arms and widely spread legs, he seemed to be subtly touching the college girl. Is this guy pretending to be asleep? I watched closely, but the college girl, out of fear, seemed unable to stand up. Should I help her? As I was contemplating, the college girl, noticing my gaze, looked up at me. To me, her look seemed to be pleading for help. I nodded slightly to the college girl. Understanding my intention, she nodded back. At that moment, I grabbed the college girl's arm and briskly helped her to stand her. Ouch! As the college girl suddenly stood up, the middle-aged man who had been leaning on her fell onto the train seat with a thud. Simultaneously, a chuckle spread among the surrounding passengers. "Are you okay?" While addressing the middle-aged man, I maneuvered the college girl behind me to shield her. "What the hell are you doing?" The man glared at me as he stood up. Then, he fiercely punched me in the face. "What are you doing hitting me all of a sudden?" "Shut up." The middle-aged man swung at me again, attempting to hit me. At that moment, I calmly grabbed his arm and declared, "This is assault. I'm calling the police." While saying that, I pushed the middle-aged man to the floor, still holding onto his arm. Thanks to the help of some salarymen around who understood the situation, we managed to subdue the middle-aged man without much trouble. After that, I got off at the next station with the conductor that another passenger had called to the scene. I had to go to the railway police office inside the station to explain what had happened. In the station office, not only was I questioned about the incident, but I also received treatment for the cheek that the middle-aged man had punched. While I was dealing with this, the college girl I helped came over to me. "My name is Emily. Thank you so much for your help. I'd like to offer you something in return." "No, it's fine. But you're a college student, right? Don't you need to go?" "Yes. I just wanted to get an early start on my report, so I'm okay. But it's almost 7 a.m. What about your work?" "I have a golf outing." "Wait, it's already 7 a.m. I have to go." Realizing the time after Emily mentioned it, I saw I had only a few minutes left until the 7 a.m. meeting. I rushed out of the station office. "Wait, I want to give you something in return." "Your gratitude is enough. Take care." I shouted back and ran at full speed to the platform. I jumped onto the arriving train without a second thought. I hope I make it. I hope I make it. I wished this on the train, but of course, there was no chance of making it on time. Eventually, I arrived at the meeting spot about 30 minutes late. "You're late, Lucas. What were you doing?" John approached me with a forced smile. He didn't raise his voice because of Mr. Baker, but it was clear he was angry. "Your face is swollen. Did you try to pick up a girl and get punched? I was helping a college girl who was being harassed on the train, and I got punched. What? You helped a college girl? Do you think that excuse will fly? Don't lie so blatantly. John yelled. However, Mr. Baker and the client, Mr. Johnson, had the opposite reaction. Wow, your employee is quite brave and commendable. Helping a harassed college girl isn't something anyone can easily do. Mr. Johnson praised me. He's one of our rising stars, talented, and definitely someone to watch. I'm envious. I'd like to have someone like him in my company. We won't let him go. Lucas, was it? Anyway, you did a good thing. Well done. Mr. Johnson and Mr. Baker laughed. Seeing this, John could only offer a forced smile. However, once Mr. Baker and Mr. Johnson got into the car, John came over and whispered, "It's because a guy like you tried to show off in front of a girl that you got what you deserved. You're lucky that's all that happened," and sneered at me. But John seemed to be in a good mood all day, perhaps pleased by my injury. His cheering was spirited, and I believe he fully demonstrated his skills as a sycophant. Perhaps thanks to that, both Mr. Baker and Mr. Johnson seemed to be enjoying their golf game in high spirits. Meanwhile, after stumbling at the start, I was desperate to make up for it. I got so carried away that I forgot to hold back and played my best. As a result, I ended up scoring better than Mr. Baker and the others. While they praised me, John later said behind my back, "You should at least know to hold back. This is the worst impression. But don't worry. You're off the fast track now. Serves you right." Excessive deference can be disrespectful. But this was definitely a mistake. While I regretted my actions, I headed home for the day. However, that business golf outing had little impact on my life. I wasn't particularly targeted by Mr. Baker, nor did I receive any complaints from Mr. Johnson. In fact, Mr. Johnson remembered me and even requested my involvement a few times. Half a year passed without knowing whether I had been taken off the fast track or not. As the new term arrived, our company was also set to welcome new employees. Suddenly, John instructed me to give a speech as the employee representative. If I had been given prior notice, I would have been confident in handling it. But it seemed John wanted to see me fail, as he informed me on that day. Being told to give a speech so suddenly, I hadn't prepared anything. "What are you talking about? I'm giving you a chance to redeem yourself after messing up the business golf. Don't you get it? If that's the case, at least give me a heads up the day before." "What? Do you have a complaint?" "No." "Well, do your best. The company's image depends on your speech. It's a big responsibility. There will be coverage by the company newsletter, and if you mess up your speech, you might get fired." In the hallway of the entrance ceremony venue, John patted my shoulder, adding pressure. So you're always nitpicking like this. That explains the pressure at the job interviews." Surprised by the voice coming from behind, we turned around. There stood a young woman with her arms crossed and cheeks puffed in annoyance. "Who are you?" John approached the woman. "Just as you see, I'm a new employee." The woman retorted firmly. I recognized the woman and couldn't help but stare intently at her. Noticing my gaze, she turned towards me. At that moment, the woman pointed at me and exclaimed loudly, "Oh, it's you, the guy from that time. Hi. Long time no see. So you work here. By the way, is your face okay? Any scars left?" As she spoke, she reached out to touch my cheek. That's when I finally remembered her. The college girl from the train. "Jess, remember me? I'm the college girl you helped that time." The woman was Emily, the college girl I had helped on the train. Dressed in a suit, she looked completely different. I remembered she seemed scared of the man at that time, but now she seemed unbothered by John and me, which was reassuring. As I thought this, John smirked and said, "Oh, so you were drooling over the new employees." "What, old man, got a problem?" Emily snapped back at John. "It's nothing special. In our world, being quick with your tasks is expected, but being quick to make the moves on girls and not work isn't something to be praised for." "Enough already, old man. Insulting him isn't going to make you look any better." "What did you say?" "Besides, he's my prince, and I won't forgive you if you insult him any further." "Presumptuous little girl. Don't you know how to speak to your boss?" "You're the boss. If you're the boss, then stop putting down your subordinates and strive to be someone your team can trust." Silence. Silence. How did a naive girl like you even get hired? Was it through connections, or did you use your womanly charms? John leered at Emily with a lascivious grin, licking his lips. Feeling a chill, Emily hid behind me. That's when it happened. A low voice echoed from the shadows of the corridor. "I'm sorry, but I believe a company should only have competent individuals, even if it involves someone close. I have no intention of showing leniency." Everyone turned towards the source of the voice. There stood Mr. Baker, with a displeased expression. "Mr. Baker." John straightened up instantly. At the same moment, Emily ran towards Mr. Baker. "Dad." "Emily, here you are." Mr. Baker stroked Emily's head as she ran to him. "Dad, what?" John's eyes darted around in confusion. His face contorted, then quickly turned pale. Overwhelmed with surprise, I could only watch silently as the events unfolded. Then, Mr. Baker approached me and said, "The woman you helped during golf was my daughter Emily, wasn't it?" "Yes, it seems so. I was told by Emily about it that night, and seeing your swollen cheek, I thought it might be you, but I couldn't bring Emily to the office. And while I was contemplating, much time had passed. I'm truly sorry for the delayed gratitude. Thank you for helping my daughter." Mr. Baker expressed his gratitude towards me. I awkwardly responded to Mr. Baker's thanks. "No, it's okay. I just did what anyone would do." "We are so grateful for your help." Mr. Baker expressed his gratitude to me once again. Right after that, Mr. Baker's expression changed completely as he turned to face John. Glaring sharply at John, he spoke in a low, almost threatening voice. "John, for someone who's always following me around, you seem to be incapable of even the most basic aspects of managing your subordinates, aren't you?" "Mr. Baker, that's, well, it seems you lack the ability to learn, so it can't be helped." "What do you mean?" "Staying in the position of manager with your level of learning ability is pointless, so let's transfer you to a department where you can learn how to interact with people better." "A transfer? It's not a demotion. You're not being removed from the path to promotion, because you'll be transferred to a department where you have a significant responsibility as a manager." Mr. Baker patted Mr. Thompson on the shoulder with a thud. It was clear what he meant. John just collapsed on the spot. "Well, that means there will be an open spot in your department. In other words, it's your turn to be promoted. Just make sure not to mess up your speech, Lucas." "Yes, sir." "I'm counting on you, then." Mr. Baker patted my shoulder and then left. Left behind, Emily gazed at me with sparkling eyes and murmured, "You're really being counted on, aren't you, big brother?" "Well, maybe so." "Amazing. And the induction ceremony speech is like representing all the employees, right? You really are a prince. Amazing. So amazing." Emily was jumping up and down, bubbling with excitement like a child. Just watching her made me feel inexplicably nervous. "Oh, right. I need to find a perfect spot to take pictures with my phone. See you ahead." Don't expect too much from me. It just makes me more nervous. I let out a wry smile as I watched Emily dash off. In the end, the induction ceremony concluded without a hitch. I was curious about Emily, who was at the front row taking photos of the ceremony, but my speech also went smoothly. Right after the ceremony, Mr. Thompson was called to the HR department and was immediately assigned to be in charge of the supply warehouse. Moreover, it seems he was nominated as the manager of the warehouse. Though the department and titles sound respectable, in simple terms, it was just a security guard role. It was a quiet position replacing a retired security guard. On the other hand, in my department where the manager was absent, Mike, the section chief, got promoted to manager. I was also promoted from chief to section chief. And my first task in this new role was to train Emily. Apparently, this was a direct order from Mr. Baker, and the new manager, Mike, relayed it to me with a wry smile. This is almost like an abuse of authority. Isn't this nepotism? Because, as a section chief, you'll work with various employees. You'll have more opportunities to interact with female employees. Just the thought of my prince working closely with other women. Ugh. Emily pouted as she spoke. Seeing her sulk like a child, I sighed and responded. It can't be helped. It's work after all. No way, absolutely not, because you're my prince. Hey, about that, calling me prince, are you planning to make that stick? Everyone in our department has started teasing me, calling me prince. I mentioned it in a low voice, but I couldn't deny the feeling that it was too late. Emily looked puzzled, and the people around us were smirking while listening to our conversation. Several weeks later, we were now being treated as a couple in the midst of a workplace romance by everyone around us. Moreover, rumors had spread that our relationship was officially recognized by Mr. Baker. Moreover, my colleagues would even tease me, saying, "You've snagged a catch." When I told this to Emily, she whispered in my ear with a laugh, "It's too late to back out now, isn't it? So, I'm ready whenever you are." Emily said it jokingly, but I'm sure she was also expecting something. I wasn't against the idea either and was ready to make up my mind. So, I responded with this. "Will you become my princess starting today?" It wasn't the best line for proposing a relationship with marriage in mind, but Emily nodded happily, so I think it was fine. I'll make sure to come up with something more clever when I actually propose. I was already thinking about what to say for the proposal, so I wouldn't panic like I did for that speech.